Welcome to the Security Squad podcast, everybody. My name is Brian Horning. I'm here with my co-hosts, Reginald, Andre, and Randy. Brian, how are you, gentlemen?
Good morning. Happy Super Bowl after Tuesday, right?
All right.
Doing great out here, man. Looking to see the weather warm up a little bit. We were freezing cold out here, man. It was down to like 45 and 50 the last couple of days.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. So, welcome to the show, folks. This is the cybersecurity podcast where we bring you the business of cybersecurity. Every week we record this podcast to update you on the latest of what we can find out there, what's going on with cyber attacks, cyber criminals, and really what you can start doing to protect yourself. A lot of things we're going to jump into today aren't being covered by mainstream media. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and we're covering the things that are important around cybersecurity because, as you can see, this stuff is growing. It's becoming a bigger threat for businesses and people every day. So we want to get the word out, make sure people are aware. So help us grow the show, share our show, and get our content out there to people so they know that this stuff is going on. I talk to guys, I don't know about you, but I talk to more and more people who just aren't aware of the breadth and depth of these threats. You know, I think we were talking about it in the green room, Randy, where you were mentioning like a lot of people think that just having multi-factor authentication turned on is good enough for cybersecurity. And, you know, we're here to tell you and we're here to educate you on why that's not the case. So help us out, share our show, help us grow the show. You guys really help us out, and, you know, you're contributing and sharing us out. So just keep doing that for us and we'll keep putting out content once a week for you. All right, guys. So today, obviously, Andre brought up the Super Bowl. We have the 49ers, who I think were eliminated in the NFC Championship game, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yep. 49ers organization is actually dealing with a ransomware attack. And the interesting thing is we're going to dive into a little bit more because somebody from the FBI kind of leaked out some information around the 49ers cyber attack that kind of raised my eyebrows. And we're going to get into that a little bit and see what this ransomware group that attacked the 49ers is actually, you know, really up to, because there's a lot more cyber attacks by this group than just the 49ers. And then we're also going to jump into why multi-factor authentication may not be the thing that really protects you from a lot of different things in the very near future, because the reality of it is this is very much a cat and mouse game, right? And, you know, if we think back, backups used to be the way that people protected themselves from ransomware until they started attacking the backups and stealing the data and using the exfiltrated data as the leverage to get you to pay. And now they have said their sights set on multi-factor authentication, because multi-factor authentication is something that is making it harder for these guys to, you know, successfully attack companies and then successfully deploy ransomware. And obviously they're going to try to figure out a way to disable or get around these tools that we've put in place. And that's what they're working on today. So we're going to get into that and we're going to talk about that. So before we dive into the content, you guys want to talk about anything? Super Bowl halftime show? I don't know. What do you guys, anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, Super Bowl was a great game overall, and I had a lot of good times in our backyard with our friends and family. So it was a great show.
Yeah, pretty much same.
I like the halftime show. I grew up watching those guys, so I was a fan. But all right, so 49ers. Got this article up from ESPN, and it says the San Francisco 49ers have been hit by a ransomware attack with cyber criminals claiming they stole some of the football team's financial data. So why would a cyber criminal go after a national football team?
Well, it definitely makes the headlines, right?
Number one. Yep.
And
go ahead.
Money. They can get money from them.
And then, you know, financial information, how much players make or how much certain vendors make and things like that. and there's a lot of probably things that happen in the NFL that they don't want getting out and being leaked to the public. So we're not talking about major critical infrastructure here. We're talking about an entertainment environment. Yes, it's a big name. It's probably, a worldwide recognized name. When you say San Francisco 49ers, a lot of people around the world probably know who that is or what that means. So it is a big game target in that sense of the word, but it, from a critical infrastructure standpoint, from a business standpoint, not a huge dent in any supply chains or things like that, like we've seen with other attacks. So if you're the 49ers, are you paying this thing? Are you even negotiating?
Well, according to the sources, they're saying that it's not a lot of the operational or things that have to do with the stadium itself. This one is the example they're giving is a file marked 2020 invoices. It just depends on, because if it's a ransomware and now they can't access their files, there's one thing where if they can't access the files at all via backup, so it just really just depends on how good of their system is. And as we know, it doesn't matter how large a corporation is or name brand a corporation is, they could have a really really bad a way to get back their information. They may not have. So it just really depends on how good their plan is.
Yeah, and we know that the attack was through an Exchange server, so highly likely, unless they just don't use that, they're probably, my guess is they're using that Exchange server for all of their emails. So that means all the emails between owners to other owners to players. I'm sure there's all kinds of salary negotiations in there, all kinds of personal information, like, hey, thanks for joining our organization. Send us back your socials so we can start paying you. Like, I mean, the amount of data in there is endless. So to answer your question, should they pay? That I don't know. I don't know how hold of their data they have. I don't know how much leaked out. We know they won't get it all back if they pay, but we also know that potentially less likely to get leaked if they pay. So good question. I don't know if I have the answer.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I hope that this is one of those attacks that these knuckleheads do on like what they think is a big name and a big payday, but instead it got the ire of the FBI and the CIA, and now they kind of lay down the gauntlet on these guys, because this is a new ransomware group, and as we're about to get into, they seem to be kind of under the surface making some waves with a bunch of attacks that nobody's really hearing about. So that's why we want to talk about this group today. But let's just jump into the group a little bit, right? This BlackByte ransomware group that is claiming responsibility for this attack. Even in this ESPN article, I have another article to show it, but it says the news of the attack comes 2 days after FBI and U.S. Secret Service issued an alert on BlackByte ransomware, saying it had compromised multiple U.S. foreign businesses, including entities in at least 3 U.S. critical infrastructure sectors since November. So I wasn't hearing a lot about this group. It's been lockbit for the last month and a half, but here you go. Here's evidence that another ransomware group has been having a tremendous amount of success. And who's hearing about it, right? Where are you hearing about this? This is the first we've heard about BlackByte, and they've been attacking critical infrastructure since November.
Mm-hmm.
So it paints this picture to me that we're really suppressing, I don't know who it is, but we're really suppressing getting this information out to people and kind of bringing awareness to the problem. We're brushing it under the rug like we typically do with most, problems that initially surface. We like to pretend that they're not really happening as a society and as a government. and brush it under the rug. Are you guys seeing that, or do you agree with me, or do you have a different perspective?
No, absolutely. The same thing I was thinking, you could have a school system or a particular thing like that, educational wise, and, all the kids are failing, but then they continue to pass them. Nobody says anything. You hide them in that corner. And it's the same thing that's happening now. I mean, for critical infrastructures to be attacked and compromised, and it's not making the news. And, we're talking about everything else but this. Just kind of tells you where, reminds me of that movie, Don't Look Up, if you guys seen that.
No,
okay.
Haven't.
So I'm gonna go ahead, Randy.
I was just gonna say, I think it goes back to that we've discussed this several times. People get tired of news. The news cycle gets tired. I mean, so basically, it's like we're living in, like LA right now is going through a huge crime rash or crime wave, and people they know not to wear their nice jewelry when they go out, and they know not to carry fancy handbags. Blah, blah, blah. And, the news might get reported on, but I doubt it's getting clicked on anymore because people become wary of it. And, it's happening so much. People are just wary of it. This particular one really catches my eye because it's another ransomware as a service. And it's one that actually kind of died and then they revived it, and here it is back in full force now.
I don't think we're ever going to, the days of it not being ransomware as a service are gone.
Yeah.
They're never going to go back to that because, again, it's different skill sets to do different things through an attack, right?
It's more scalable.
Right. So, pay the guys who are good at breaching networks and sending phishing emails and, social engineering people to take over their accounts, right? Pay those guys to deploy the ransomware, offer it to them as a service instead of investing in your own talent or finding your own talent who can break in the networks. It's much more efficient for them to just have other people do the breaking in and then they roll in and, lock everything up for you. So, and then you all share the profits. So this article goes into it a little bit more, talks about, 49ers. It also dives into, this one statement here briefly about critical infrastructure, government facilities in the financial and food and agriculture sectors. Talks about, this whole thing with BlackByte ransomware. They first surfaced in July of last year. Kind of funny that they surfaced after a certain group went away. And then they were hit with a decryption tool because of a flaw in their system. But then they have an updated version of the ransomware that's out there now. The bottom of this article, this is the big thing that I want to talk about right now because we are, hearing a lot about this Log4j thing. And Log4j hasn't gone away just because it's out of the news cycle. It's still very much a serious vulnerability that attackers will try to use through time because people don't patch and people don't secure these systems well enough. And basically the FBI knows that this group, BlackByte, exploits the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability that's been around for a year now, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So here we are with lazy human beings, not patching systems. 365 days later, we're still seeing instances of cyber attacks that happen because of a well-known vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange server. So if you're running Exchange servers and you haven't patched this, what have you been doing for the last 12 months? What is your excuse for keeping this system up and running and not, if it has to be a legacy system or really there's no excuse in my mind that you can come up with when you have all these different options available to you today, like moving to the cloud, things like that. You can't tell me that your server farm is so huge that you can't do this in a 1 year period. Guys, disagree with that? Because
I'm going to say, is it lazy or incompetence? Because it's like especially if they have the manpower and the budget. It's
I don't know if they do have the budget, Andre, because quite frankly, just on my own experience, we've been talking to a lot of companies where we've been told lately, like they don't have the budget to work with us. And we're talking about companies that should have the budget. It's not whether the revenue's there. It's just that their perspective of what they should pay for IT as a whole in their business, meaning, hardware, software, talent, labor, all that stuff that goes into running your IT. Their perspective is that they should be paying 1% or less for that in their business. And you guys know, and we know that most companies that do security properly, and depending on how much compliance they have, it's somewhere between 3 and 6% of top line revenue. And if you're not dedicating that much, you're every day building technology debt. Every single day that you don't spend that much, you're building technology debt in your business. And one day the banker is going to come knocking and he's going to say, it's time to pay. That could be a cyber criminal, or it could be the day that your system crashes and somebody tells you this stuff's not coming back. You got to buy all new stuff. I can tell you from experience, you'd rather plan that out and do that out through budgeting and roadmaps and plan it out and not have to write a big fat check to somebody because you're in the middle of a shitstorm. So, that's kind of my thought on that one. That's like, I just feel like there's a lot of businesses out there that have to mature around IT and what they thought they could get away with in their business in terms of technology spend. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of businesses are going to start waking up and realizing that they've been getting away with, basically not paying. I don't want to say their fair share because that's not the right word, but they haven't been paying what they need to pay. Like, if a business only spends 2% of its total revenue on marketing and they're wondering why they're not growing, that's kind of like what this is tantamount to. If you're inefficient, if your employees are talking about like slow computers or not being able to get things done efficiently, or you're a victim of a cyber attack, it's probably because you were spending less than 3% on your total IT. Thoughts on that, guys? I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing with this stuff. And I only think that Log4j is just going to be kind of like the part 2 to what we're seeing with Exchange servers, right? They don't need to exploit Log4j right now because they can exploit this. The day will come when Log4j has its heyday. It's probably, 3-6 months out before we really start seeing like hackers exploiting the crap out of that.
Mm-hmm. And they're probably just in the systems now, just watching and just making, waiting to hit that button.
Right. Oh yeah, you're 100% right. Or they're, digging a deeper tunnel. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, it's really about, I would say it's not even about that they don't have money. It's about, they don't see the priority of the money. Either from hey, like if I chose to drive a 2022 Escalade, my payment on that, for a small company that might cover, half of their IT. Or if something like this pops up, I mean, all of a sudden, magically, the money's going to be there. And so the owners have to be able to see that this is a very possible future reality, and then put it in that risk perspective, and then be able to spend the money now to hopefully mitigate that risk, and either A, avoid that, or B, when it happens, you got a faster way back from it that doesn't bankrupt your business and put it out of business. So good discussion to have.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind when you say that, Randy, is like you're not paying, right? If you're not paying enough now, right? And we talked about the technology debt, and then you're not, as a business owner, you're looking at this as like an increase in your expenses, or you're looking at this as like, hey, this is something I haven't been paying for that I probably need to pay for, right? But a lot of conversations are turning towards what you kind of mentioned in the green room, where they're like, hey, I'll just do this one thing and I'll be good, because maybe that's what my cyber insurance application asked me this year. Um, and I think that that's a very dangerous game to play, simply because, again, we've mentioned that this has to happen in layers. There has to be a lot of different layers that go into it. It's not one thing. But I've even had conversations with business owners around like, hey, instead of hiring you, I'll just buy cyber insurance and that'll cover me.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that a lot of times, we're having these conversations after we've already audited their business. And I sit there and I tell them, if you buy cyber insurance with this state of your cybersecurity as it is right now, you're never going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to be wasting your money paying some insurance company. If you have an event and you try to file a claim, they're going to come in and say, you're not doing X, Y, and Z, and we're denying this claim. And the unfortunate part is, what I'm also seeing on the flip side of that, and people need to be aware of this, these insurance companies a lot of times are going in and doing the work and getting you out of the situation. But then after the fact, they're evaluating the situation, and then they're deciding, well, maybe we shouldn't have paid that claim. And they're going and filing a lawsuit against the company, or they're filing it against the person responsible for their network, whether that be a third party company or somebody, that you contracted that's not an employee of yours, or it's your own employee, which then makes your own company at fault, right, on its own. So these are the things that are happening out there that I just want to bring awareness to people, because you may hear that an insurance company bailed a business out, but you didn't hear 6 months down the road that insurance company turned around and sued a bunch of people who they deemed responsible for the event. Yeah. When the insurance companies, as our friend Chris says, the insurance companies, the bank, the insurance companies don't like being in that situation. And right now it's cyber insurance. The insurance companies are the bank. When people have a problem, they look at the insurance companies like, hey, now pay us, because we got to pay these criminals, and we got to get out of this situation. And there's not enough money coming into the product to justify what they're paying out on the back end. So they're doing what they can, which is increasing rates, lowering limits, and suing, to deny claims. So anything you guys want to add to that?
I just did a quick Google search. The average NFL team, their value is $3.8 billion, and their average profit is about $300 million.
Oh yeah.
So even if they follow the 1% rule, that's one hell of an IT budget.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it really though? I mean, I think that's the problem that we have today, is that people's expectations around what an IT budget should be is extremely skewed to the low side. And it's time for people to realize that this stuff isn't cheap, and labor in these skill sets is not cheap. And there's no easy fixing to that, right? You can't just throw somebody in front of a computer and train them on how to do this stuff. As somebody who's trained into doing this stuff, who's dedicated their life to it, who has a passion behind it, that's the type of person that's going to learn this stuff. It's not going to be some dude who's like, I was in construction and now I want to change fields and go into cybersecurity. And then, 6 months later, they're a cybersecurity person. No, it's going to take them years and years and years, probably close to a decade, to get enough skill to get to the point where they can actually be, a decent cyber defender. Mm-hmm. Right. And, this is like, you're not hiring trash men, you're hiring people with skill. I'm not going to sit here and say they're tantamount to a doctor, but there's a lot of training and a lot of things that need to be in place. And passion is one of them, right? You need to be passionate about this stuff and what you're doing, or you're never going to learn it. It takes a lot of hours, late nights. I remember when I was in my 20s, burning the candle at both ends, learning how to code, learning how to, to do everything that I know how to do today that helps me with cybersecurity. And these are the things that people need to know in order to be a good cyber defender. And again, these guys command well over $100,000 if they're paid correctly, right? For one person, and that we're not talking about a CISO or an IT director or anything like that. We're talking about, a threat hunter or somebody who knows how to, start looking for vulnerabilities in a network and help you, remediate them.
One more thing too, I just again, just looking at averages, average employee size of an NFL is about 2,500 employees.
Right.
Yeah. So that, and if you do the math, that let's just say, at X dollar per seat, that's almost $9 million. So you're right. 3 million is the low side.
Right.
Yeah.
So going into kind of our discussion about how to protect yourself, we know multi-factor authentication is kind of like the thing right now, right? We probably have zero trust on the horizon, where zero trust is going to be a thing that insurance companies are going to require in order for you to get cyber insurance. Right now, it's kind of multi-factor authentication. The insurance companies have kind of tricked themselves into thinking like, hey, if we make everybody say that they're doing multi-factor on everything, I look at that as a double-edged sword. Yes, you're increasing the protection or decreasing the threat level, but you're also opening the door for somebody saying they use multi-factor when they don't, and then when you go in to, figure out what happened in an attack and say, oh, you said you used multi-factor on everything, but we found this, that, and this that didn't have multi-factor, right? And now we can, deny your claim because you lied on your application. That's kind of what I see this as. I don't know if you guys have a thought about it, but besides that, jumping into this article, we have hackers who've begun adapting to wider use of multi-factor authentication. So figuring out ways to trick your users into either them giving the MFA code up by setting up fake websites and login pages that look like they're logging in and even are challenged with the MFA code. Because like, look, if you use Google Authenticator, I think it's a minute, right? You have a minute before that thing changes, right? So if I can get you to give me your username and password and your MFA code, and I can then log into that account within a minute, I'm probably getting in. Correct?
Yeah. We saw that in that, what article was that with the employee for a company where the guy, remember they were talking about in the dinner table, and he realized that someone got his password and he gave the 2FA. I forgot the name of that company. I
do too, but that definitely did happen, right? And you can also, multi-factor can be tricked a lot of different ways. It's not a silver bullet, right? SIM swapping can happen. So if you like to have your MFA sent to your phone in a text message, somebody can easily call your provider. And if they provide them enough personally identifiable information, they can have a new SIM sent to them, and now they have control of your phone, and they can use that to then log into your accounts. It's always better to use a hardware device or an authenticator app, but the authenticator apps have issues, right? The YubiKey, I don't know, in my opinion, I don't personally use it, but it is an effective way to kind of really not get tricked. I would have to say that a hardware device that's plugged into a machine that authenticates you is probably the best thing you can do versus an authenticator app or SMS, right?
It is. I mean, the problem with that is, though, like even going back to the SolarWinds hack from over a year ago or however long that's been, if you have the key plugged in and you get up and leave your computer for just a few seconds, if they're in your system now, they could take advantage of that as you walked away or whatever. So nothing's going to be foolproof, like you've said several times. I mean, in the last few minutes, you've got to have layers. Have the multi-factor, then also have a notification when someone logs in. Have a notification when someone logs in from outside of a allow listed IP address or tries to log in allow listed white IP address. Just yesterday, someone got a notification. Someone that I know got a notification that someone they logged in and they were asking for the MFA code. The MFA code was sent to their phone. Knowing when things like that go down really helps, create another layer. I didn't mean to get off into the weeds there, though.
No, it was good.
No,
No.
and there's been situations too where the mobile carriers aren't doing a good job training their employees. Like there's been plenty of times where I call Comcast and I'm asking a question about the account and the conversation just starts. It's not like a screen that's prompting the agent to say, well, enter the 4-digit code or a security question before you start talking about the account. So yeah.
So I finally had time to do a little digging. I mean, and the Social Security number that my Social Security number showed up on the dark web in the last 60 days or so, and it was from the T-Mobile breach.
Yep.
Right. I guess at some point, I'm pretty sure we, applied for a business account with T-Mobile, which we didn't end up moving forward with. I never did business with T-Mobile, but they were storing my personal Social Security number. God knows why. And they were breached, and now my Social Security number's on the dark web. And there's enough personally identifiable information for everybody on the planet at this point and their kids to where cyber criminals could easily call up your carrier and give them personally identifiable information that allows them to make changes on your account.
Yep.
The best thing you can do is set up what's known as a PIN, the FAN PIN. Like nothing can be done on the account unless you have that, they have that PIN. And that's what I have set up on my mobile account. You can't do anything on our accounts unless you give them that PIN. You could give them my Social Security number, my address, whatever you want. You can't do anything until that PIN is entered. And quite frankly, I didn't even assign the PIN. It was given to me by the carrier. So it's not anything that I remember or use. I have to look it up every time that I need to use it. And that's kind of how it should be, right? So what else is going on with this multi-factor authentication here, guys? What else is highlighted in this article that you want to talk about?
I mean, the basic gist of it is they're saying that because we've gone from, 25-ish% of people using it 4 or 5 years ago to 75%-ish people using it now, it's forced the bad actors to basically, figure out ways around it. This article goes into where, like you mentioned earlier, they used to use like a fake page, get your username, password, then get your MFA code like right after that, where they're doing the same thing, but they're injecting a proxy into your internet stream, if you will, that is then sending the password, sending the MFA code to them so they can enter it in remotely. Once again, begs the point, you need to have things in place like getting a warning or blocking if you try to log in from 2 different places at the same time. That ought to raise some kind of flag. I can't.
A lot of times that's dependent on the website and the developer, right? Because if you don't have that functionality available to users, that's not an option, right?
Right.
The website, like if I join a website and I log in and then somebody logs in halfway across the world and that website doesn't have the ability to detect that or allow me to plug something in that can detect that, like an API that will, to tell me when that happens, you're kind of at the mercy of the technology that's available to you for a lot of these services. So you may want to turn on multi-factor authentication on some accounts and the sites just don't offer it. Right. It's probably we're probably at a point in time in the world where if that's the case, you probably need to go find another service that does offer better security. But I think most of the things that I run into today do offer some level of multi-factor authentication. So
to quote Andre, 2022 is the year. If you don't have multi-factor turned on, that account's going to get hacked. Andre said that our first podcast of the year. I've probably told that to 100 people this year.
All right, so real quick, we'll wrap up the show with a question here. What are some of the security risks of using authenticator apps other than social engineering? What do you guys think about that one?
Well, one thing I've seen is that if your phone isn't updated and you have an unsecure phone running the authenticator app, then that's one issue. So always make sure that your mobile device and other devices you're using has updates on there. Also, one more thing too is, there's the terms, safest doesn't necessarily mean perfect. So it's that sense of false security. As Randy mentioned, he had a customer where, because he was like, oh, I got 2FA and therefore we're covered. We don't have to worry about anything. So that's another thing where people think, okay, just because I have 2FA, now, you know what, I don't need anything else. So that in a way is another risk of having that, is that safe sense of security.
Yeah, that's good. And I would say, back to the phone thing, most of the authenticator apps are on a phone. So I would say, do not use a phone that's not actively being updated, and do not use a off-brand, hey, my uncle went to visit China last year and brought me this, 28 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabyte hard drive on a phone, blah, blah, blah. And, you've never heard of the company before. I saw
it needs all that power to send all the data it's sending back to
exactly.
I
saw a demonstration of that, and they basically booted up one of those phones inside of a Faraday cage because they knew it could probably infect the things around them. And the information that it was trying to send home was insane, But bottom line is, if you're on an unsecure phone, I would suggest one of the major brand phones, and it needs to be updated with a current update. So, you minimize the risk of them getting your codes.
There's a feature on every single phone also that allows you to encrypt the device. I would highly recommend that you find that setting in your phone and turn on the encryption. That just prevents anybody from being able to take your phone if they can't log into it or boot it up, pull any data off of that. And the only other thing I would ask people to be mindful of when using authenticator apps is, when you set up an authenticator app like Google Authenticator, it always gives you a recovery phrase in the event that you lose your phone or something happens to your device where it gets wiped, and you can restore those codes from your backup phrase or your backup codes. And this is usually done in the beginning when you first set up the app. It tells you to print out the codes so you have it. I'd recommend that you do it, because if you're ever in a jam, you drop your phone in the toilet or in the ocean, you're going to need those codes, or you're going to be resetting up all your MFA, which is not fun. The other side of it is that, with that being the case, if I can get my hands on your backup codes, I can easily download the Authenticator app from the store, plug in your backup codes, and boom, now I have all your codes and they're running on my phone. So, definitely print that out, laminate it, throw it in a safe somewhere where it's not going to, get caught in a fire, and keep that secure. Don't store it online. Don't store it on a computer. Because if that computer gets hacked or compromised in any way, shape, or form, now they have your backup codes, and now they can, go figure out what your 2FA is on everything. Keep it offline, keep it printed out. I laminated mine. I put it in a fireproof safe. I know exactly where it's at. My wife knows where it's at. So in the event I die, she knows where to go and get it. And, that's kind of how I plan out that. Because you're not getting in any of my accounts without my Authenticator app. It's just never going to happen. So keep that in mind. Backup codes, keep them safe. Definitely use them, print them out. Don't store them online. Don't store them on a code, or don't store them on a computer. And, keep them secure from prying eyes, so to speak. Because once they have those, they're in your app. All right, guys. I think that about does it. We're about 40 minutes in.
Yep.
Appreciate the question from Steven. He's always a big fan. We appreciate that. Steven shares our show. I guarantee it. So, All right, guys. Appreciate your time. You got anything for the good of the show, or we'll just wrap it up?
Nope, I'm all set on my side.
Same
Cool.
here.
All right, we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.